Don't sit yet. We're not starting quite yet. I'm going to ask when the chairman just make an announcement that they want you to grab every bit of the refreshments outside. They've already paid for them. The chairman has asked me to ask you to go and grab them real quick before you're seated. And And also, there are just about 2 or 3 more minutes of people in the lines, so we'll be starting in a few seconds. So make it real quick if you want to get something to eat. Real quick, the chairman will be here to start very shortly. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think you've got your refreshments, so you've got pretty much like 120 seconds to grab your seats now, and we'll be starting in 2 minutes. Thank you very much.
overstock.com, especially invited guests, members of the electronic and print media, members of the private sector and civil society, welcome to the Barbados Hilton. And I declare this historic event open. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator. Central Bank governors, parliamentary representatives, ambassadors, friends, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Barbados's first FinTech Forum, Central Bank Meets Blockchain. Some of you may know me as a Trini, although based on the time I have spent in Barbados in the last 18 months, my wife may want to dispute that fact. We are privileged to have a turnout such as this today. It is with a succinct sense of honor that I stand up here, knowing the journey of the last 24 months. So let me first welcome you on behalf of our colleagues from overstock.com, the CTU, the Caribbean Telecommunication Union, Price Waterhouse, and Flow. This event is equal parts exciting and equal parts enlightening for those of us who are beginning to understand the power of blockchain technology as it's being bandied all over the world. Many are confused, and hopefully by the end of the day today, we'll begin to understand in a great sense what the benefits blockchain technology can bring to the region and to the world. So I'm not going to go on too much about that because we have a wonderful host of speakers who will, with no doubt, fulfill those obligations. What I do want to touch on as a Caribbean region is the fact that we are fortunate to be here today for multiple reasons, particularly with the tragedies that have befallen our brethren in the last couple of weeks. It's important that we remember that. As a Caribbean region, we are always stronger together. Many of our brothers and sisters have suffered daily in the hurricanes of the last couple of weeks. They've ravaged our sister islands and taken its toll all the way into the United States. So before we get into the conference, I'd like everyone to stand up and join us in a moment of silence for the memory of those who have lost their lives and whose lives have been completely upturned by the events of the last couple of weeks. Great, thank you very much, guys. But I'd like to ask you to remain standing as we hear the playing of the Barbadian national anthem. Perhaps we can sing it, maybe?
time factors, and I'm very cautious. But let me say to all of you present that the reason why, for me, that this is a momentous occasion, it speaks to the changes that we as a people, it speaks to the changes that we must implement if we are going to restructure and diversify our economies within the Caribbean region and even here in Barbados. Blockchain technology that has as its bedrock digital currency and the way in which that is going to impact on our daily lives and on the way we looked at how best we are going to structure our businesses. I am confident that today, just as what happened back then in 1791, when 24 young men, all young men, sat and wrote an accord to establish what we know today as the New York Stock Exchange. Prior to that, we had what we termed the Philadelphia Merchants Exchange, but this group of young persons decided that they were going to take it a step further from what was happening within the Philadelphia Exchange. And as you know, the word blockchain technology and digital currency has created some conversations that are very positive and some conversations that are very negative. I am one of those who are on the side of the positive conversations if we are going to have any economic impact as far as international business and asset management is concerned. And the reason why I say that I'm looking forward that coming out of this meeting, one day we can all sit back and say on the 28th of September, just as what happened back in 1791, we can say on the 28th of September, a group of persons with like minds sat within a room at the Hilton, Barbados, and came up with an accord to embrace not only blockchain technology, but the bedrock of digital currencies. And coming out of that, we can think about a digital currency. These are the things that I'm thinking about. I don't have any financial speeches. I'm speaking from understanding and working, coming out of a background working in Wall Street as an investment banker and understanding how things change. But we should be able to say and put our thoughts together. What are the possibilities of establishing a CARICOM digital currency that can go parallel with the Barbados dollar as well as the Eastern Caribbean dollar? I made a statement a couple of months ago. What is the value of the Barbados dollar based on international trade? And our journalists wrote headline, Senator Ince made a statement that the Barbados dollar has no value. Now I want you to listen to me carefully, because many times many of us listen but we don't hear. And a lot of people hear but don't listen. And I made the statement looking at the 5 basket of currencies, because there are only 5 basket of currencies. What is the value of the Barbados dollar within the basket of currencies? Clearly understanding what it is as far as currency trades are concerned. But when you look into that basket, you do not see a Barbados dollar. There has to be a conversion rate. You have to convert Barbados dollars to US dollars if you are going to carry out international trade like any other currency. Or you convert Barbados dollar to pound sterling or to the Japanese yen. If you want to create a hedge, and I'm not speaking technical language for those of you who understand asset management, if you want to use a strategy within your asset portfolio, you can use an Australian dollar versus a Japanese yen. You can use an Australian dollar versus a pound sterling, but you cannot say an EC dollar or a Barbados dollar versus a pound sterling. So what do the blockchain technology presents? It presents an opportunity for us to now create an environment where we can say, this is the EC dollar, this is the Barbados dollar, running against a digital currency within the blockchain that is paralleled, and that can have positive implications. As I said, I am on the side of those that are optimistic, where we can say the brains on the 28th of September sat down, drew on a card, create an environment where we now have the blockchain technology that impacts with our digital currencies, and we can now have a Barbados dollar parallel to a digital currency, or parallel to a CARICOM currency, if you want to give it a tag name, CARICOM XY point blockchain X. Those are the type of things that we want to happen, and those are the type of things that we must consider. I am confident it is here to stay. And I want to say publicly, thanks to PwC and all of those who are involved with the technology, any other financial institutions locally and regionally that are also involved, because, as I said, blockchain technology, digital currencies are here to stay, and let us look at how best we are going to go forward in creating the type of financially viable economies that are necessary if we are going to go on the path of restructuring, diversifying, and creating the type of economic growth that is necessary. Thank you very much, and a pleasure.
Thank you, Senator Ince. You know, one of the interesting things that the Senator said that makes me understand that he gets it is that there has been a tremendous amount of positives and negatives surrounding blockchain technology, particularly because, for those of you that may not know, it's actually called the Bitcoin blockchain. And the blockchain, as we know it, does not really work without Bitcoin. So there's been a lot of aspersions being cast due to the uncertainty behind Bitcoin. But the positives and the negatives really stem from a lack of understanding. Our next speaker is one of the architects, certainly in the region, of the evangelizing and the educating of people on both digital currencies and blockchain in the region. He's garnered the title, certainly in our neck of the woods, of Mr. Bitt, Mr. Bitcoin, and various others. Gabriel Abed, since the inception of Bitt, has envisioned Bitt to be a solution for increasing financial inclusion and providing financial services for the unbanked portions of the Caribbean, which is a startlingly high number. He has spoken internationally on the topic of blockchain and digital currencies to multiple audiences, including the Commonwealth Secretariat, where I was with him, the United Nations, World Bank, and many central bank forums around the region. He doesn't need much introduction, and as such, I welcome up here now our first speaker, co-founder of Bitt, Gabriel Abed.
Good morning, everyone. Wow, this is pretty awesome and amazing. So today I'm going to talk about what we have done at Bitt and what we have done over the years and how we got to this exact point. And I'm going to touch on two key ingredients that would have helped us look at what we needed to do here at Bitt. So one of the first things and the first ingredient is, of course, blockchain technology. It's the reason why we're all here today to discuss this forum. And a blockchain is just nothing more than a secure, open digital ledger system that cannot be tampered with by any single person or entity. This means that everyone in the ledger has access to all record entries within the blockchain at every moment in the lifespan of the transaction. This here provides some of the greatest immutability, integrity, and accountability we've ever had in any financial system. And that's one of the first ingredients. And the benefits of blockchain are that it's trustless and allows for trust and verification for all transactions committed to the ledger. I don't need to trust anyone that is utilizing the system at any given point. It operates through a consensus-driven algorithm, and it can't be tampered with by a single person or entity. It provides an immutable public record that can't be destroyed. And it removes the risk of forgery and eliminates the double spend problem. It enables interconnected financial ecosystems and global money transfer. And it provides a mathematical digital representation of real-world objects, taking us towards the Internet of Things. And finally, every single person can participate following the same rules. That was the first ingredient. The second ingredient that we looked at was the Caribbean and its systematic financial problems that this region faced, or rather that this region was plagued with. We're talking about high and lengthy settlement times. The amount of time it takes to get money in or out of the region, it's extremely lengthy. On top of that, even localized transactions. Financial inclusion of underbanked citizens, and I believe we tout around nearly 50% underbanked citizens or adults within our region. The lack of banking infrastructure is quite poor when compared to developed nations. And the fact that within the region we have fragmented currencies. It's not a single currency like the Barbadian dollar and the Trinidadian dollar. You have the Eastern Caribbean, and you have multiple currencies but small nations managing those systems. There's restrictive barriers to e-commerce. There's high remittance costs. There's no open gateways or payment systems for many to participate with. And finally, one of the biggest risks facing our region is the risk of de-risking. So, taking these two ingredients, my partner and I came up with our core mission, which is to provide financial inclusion to every last man, woman, and child. And our slogan was to empower people. So we stuck with that. And using this mission and using and following this slogan, Generation 1 of Bitt was formed. And in January 2014, we launched BI.TT, which was a digital asset exchange. The goal of this digital asset exchange was not just to introduce the Caribbean to the world of digital currencies, but to give an avenue where we could convert one type of currency, a national currency, into something like a digital currency like Bitcoin. We allowed consumers to have access to a push and pull exchange that would allow them to convert their national currencies into digital currencies. And of course, to empower consumers with the ability to move into and out of digital currencies. But this system had a shortfall. It wasn't enough. Education and awareness towards blockchain was lacking. Encouraging of a digital adoption using blockchain proved to be complex and difficult for people to understand. What was Bitcoin? What is blockchain? So much less trying to get people to understand digital currencies. And there was no conduit between the users, their money, and digital dollars. Thus enters Generation 2 of Bitt. In January 2015, we introduced a mobile wallet, allowing our consumers to have access to digital funds on their mobile phones. You see, we realized that while we may not have had the infrastructure like America or Canada or the United Kingdom did, we had way better penetration rate of internet and smartphones. And that gave us a very big edge on being able to deploy a system such as Bitt's mobile wallet. Around this period, Avatar Capital made a capital investment in us, and it allowed us to continue developing our system. But still, we realized there were shortfalls. A mobile wallet was not enough. We realized there was limitations on management around physical cash. Local currencies were not fluid and did not interface between consumers and the mobile wallet. The functionality of the national dollars were limited to the physical world and were not conducive for mobile application. And the risk associated with digital currencies like Bitcoin created user uncertainty. By February 2016, we introduced Generation 3 of Bitt, the mobile digital dollar. In essence, this was a digitization of the Barbados national dollar on the blockchain, a first of its kind collaboration between a private organization and a central bank to accomplish a digital representation of a national currency. We also created the process and the procedures of how a central bank would go about issuing, controlling, and managing this digital counterpart. We integrated this digital dollar and the systems around it into our platform. And we provided users with a product that allowed them to interface with their national currency digitally. People can now wrap their heads around a digital Barbados dollar. We didn't need to educate on blockchain or Bitcoin. However, that's still one of our core missions. But it was not necessary because everyone could understand what a digital dollar was. And one of the greatest outcomes of this was we were able to provide integrity, accountability, and transparency to the money base. One of the most beautiful systems that we could have imagined for a financial monetary system. And it's now possible because of combining something like the blockchain with a central bank. Some of the shortfalls that we faced: lacking regulation and legislation and legal frameworks to support digital dollars, mobile money, and payment service providers. And then, of course, an ecosystem to support that digital dollar. So the central bank issued a digital dollar. What financial institution had integrated with it? What consumer was able to talk to it? What merchant was accepting it at their coffee shop, at their ticket booth? What teller was able to cash in or cash out and move a user from the physical world to the digital world? And thus enters the Generation 4 of Bitt, the ecosystem, and where we currently stand today. Our mission here right now is to build the software to provide digital dollar transaction services to all three layers of the money base, to create the utility for consumers to accomplish a digital transaction anywhere a physical transaction occurred, and to replicate a cash economy digitally. So the ecosystem looks like the following. You have a counterpart or a standard built on top of the blockchain, and then you fall with three layers directly under it, or rather adjacent. The three layers are the III, or the digital money base. The layer one, issuance, the point at which a financial monetary authority, such as a central bank, could issue their digital dollars through a secure and responsible platform. The function would be a platform and a solution for monetary authorities to issue digital assets securely onto the blockchain. The layer below that, the integration layer. This is where we start to build the standards around the digital dollar into the financial services, whether it was a commercial bank, a financial institution, a credit union, or a telecom. The ability to integrate this digital standard into their already existing legacy architecture and framework. And then, of course, my favorite layer, layer 3, the interface layer. This is what touches every single one in this room. This is where you interface via your mobile wallet, you interface via tellers, ATMs, merchant solutions. It's the point at which the digital dollar touches you. So, where do we go from here? Now that we're at the point where we're building out this ecosystem, what's the next step? So I'll give you a quick peek. And if we were to look at the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas that mandates CARICOM, of which Barbados is one of the member states, there's an interesting section on paragraph 2D, article 14, that birthed an idea towards something that I would get to in a second. Pending the establishment of a monetary union in the community, recommend arrangements for the free convertibility of currencies of the member states on a reciprocal basis. How do we then look at taking this mandate and build technology around it with the solutions we already have? Well, introducing Generation 5 of Bitt and what we'll be building towards in the near-term future. A multilateral clearing settlement facility for the Caribbean. The ability for a synthetic monetary union through the use of blockchain-backed digital dollars. Designed with a smart contract in mind to follow the rules of the Caribbean's trade-weighted effective exchange rate index, utilizing Caribbean digital currencies. Ensuring a multilateral exchange rate index is driven as well by an autonomous system where all monetary authorities participate via the same rules of engagement, driven by accountability and transparency. Introducing to the Caribbean a solution for the Caribbean settlement network that we'll be titling as Carib Coin. And of course, ensuring that we empower people. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Gabriel. Obviously, as I spoke briefly before, Gabriel, about education, and then we heard words like immutable technology, distributed ledgers. I didn't speak to you as much about understanding because it's still very difficult for some of us to understand some of those concepts. But there's going to be enough during the course of the day to fill us in, including one of our next speakers, Chris Kersey. Chris is the blockchain subject matter expert. Yes, at PricewaterhouseCoopers on emerging technology and new services. He focuses on how blockchain-enabled ecosystems will impact business models and shared business processes across industries. So, you know, over the last 16 years, he's advised major organizations in the public sector on industrial products, technology, media, and financial services in areas such as digital business and technology strategies. So with that, which I hope I haven't confused any of the early adopters, I call Chris Kersey up to give us a bit more education.
I prefer the term subject matter specialist. You know, this technology and the ecosystem around the technology is evolving so rapidly. To declare one as an expert is probably a bit foolhardy at this stage of the game. I am absolutely honored and thrilled to be here presenting to you today. The purpose of what I want to accomplish over the next 45 to 50 minutes, so just, you know, actually I have 20 minutes, but the next 20 minutes is just to help to demystify some of the terms that you're going to hear around this technology. I also want to anchor us on an understanding of what Bitcoin is and what Bitcoin is not. I think that's hugely important given the hype around and the speculation around the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency markets. And then finally, at the end of the day, I just want to help everyone in the room understand how some of these core concepts come to life in the business context. So I'm actually going to start, and this is, I apologize if this comes across as unprofessional, but I do want to take a picture of the group. I'm sorry. It comes into play later, trust me. Everyone smile. Can I have everyone on this side of the room move to that side, please? Sorry. Okay. All right, this is important. All right. I tend to be a bit animated when I present, so I would prefer just to be able to walk away. So what is blockchain? I think it's really important to understand that blockchain is a tool in kind of the next generation digital transformation toolkit. It has applications broadly, and we're obviously talking about a specific application here today. And as Gabriel mentioned, you know, you're going to hear things about IoT, Internet of Things, right? How many of you have Fitbits or Apple Watches? Okay. That is actually an IoT sensor. That is giving telemetry about you and your health. And if you share it with friends, you've now created a network there where you're exchanging IoT sensor information. Robotic process automation is obviously very hot in the news right now. You've heard a lot about how in financial services a lot of jobs are going to get usurped by this technology. I like to think of this more as it is going to change the nature of work for a lot of people in those areas. Instead of moving process widgets from point to point, you're now going to equip people to be more decision makers and data scientists. If you think back 30 years ago, when avionics on airplanes had evolved to the point where you no longer needed a pilot, we still need a pilot, right? We want a pilot there when we take off, when we land, and heaven forbid, in the case of any unhappy path events, right? Cloud technology, you're going to hear a lot about this, especially in financial services, around the application of cloud technology. Suffice to say, it is a configurable infrastructure that a lot of the cloud providers are looking at blockchain as a service to sit on top of to drive their consumption. Artificial intelligence, when you think about the ledger and all the information that's stored on the ledger. If I have an analytics engine or artificial intelligence sitting on top of that, imagine the insights that I can derive from all of that information. And then finally, blockchain, which we're going to double click into here. The first thing I want to talk about is blockchain is not necessarily Bitcoin. Blockchain is the underlying technology that supports Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. It's really important to understand that Bitcoin is on a public and permissionless network. And part of the reason why there's so much hype, so much press, and so much volatility around Bitcoin as a cryptocurrency, obviously there have been some, I'll call them less than favorable associations with Bitcoin in terms of its use in some, I'll just call them darker side of the net activities. That being said, part of the challenge with Bitcoin is it's not tied to an observable asset or index. So you see all the volatility in the trading of Bitcoin because what is the real value of it? It's highly speculative right now. That's not to say that it's not valuable. We just don't know what the real value is. And then secondarily, part of the challenge with this being on a public permissionless network without any type of standards or oversight is when events occur, you don't have any form of remediation relative to like you would in a digital currency tied to a sovereign currency that we're discussing today. Really important distinction. So if I move on, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this slide, but this is just kind of walks through at the very, very basic elements of how blockchain supporting any type of use case, whether it's a cryptocurrency use case or other, works. So we have someone who requests a transaction. They actually submit a transaction request or exchange information onto the network. We're talking about peer-to-peer connectivity. So we, in some instances, remove the need for any type of intermediary. In the United States, there's lots of discussion around how, potentially in the capital markets, DTCC, the Depository Clearance Association, could potentially get usurped by this technology. That's not going to happen. They have an entrenched market position. However, their members are going to demand that they utilize this technology for a myriad of reasons, for transparency purposes, efficiency purposes, all kinds of different purposes. So that's broadcast to other nodes on the network. The other nodes are able to decipher the information using public and private key cryptography, and we'll talk about that here momentarily. That validates the transaction using what we'll call consensus. This can get really technical and really, really wonky. We're going to try to keep it really off the wonky side. Once that transaction has been validated, it's added to the block is added to the chain, and it's an add-only type of database, meaning that that record at that point in time is completely immutable, completely auditable, and completely deterministic. That's what's really powerful about the underlying technology. So if I go to the next slide, I call this the special sauce of blockchain. Here are kind of the four key components technologically that come together to make this special. We just talked about the distributed ledger, the notion of node-to-node connectivity. What we see inside financial services and across other industries is when information is made available in near real time to all participants on the network, and you have business rules around how those interactions need to occur, you actually remove a lot of adjustment, reconciliation, dispute resolution, audit type activities required, because now we've got a single source of truth that's shared across all participants in near real time. Cryptography. So a few things come together here: public-private key infrastructure, secure hash algorithm. You'll hear about secure hash. Think of it as a bunch of inputs that are combined into one single digital fingerprint for that output that is really, really hard to decrypt without the key. As a matter of fact, cryptography, to the extent that this network infrastructure and this network architecture are so compelling that the Department of Defense in the United States, DARPA, which is their research arm, which invented the internet, much to Al Gore's chagrin, basically is using blockchain technology as an anti-cyber threat prevention tool to guard satellite and missile silo information. And I'll get to that momentarily. Consensus. This is where we basically say only certain parties on the network can make certain types of updates at a point in time on the network for certain types of transactions. How many of you are familiar with the McDonald's Big Mac? Does anybody know what the ingredients to a McDonald's Big Mac are? Do you remember the old song? This probably dates me. 2 all beef patties, special sauce, less cheese, pickles on Genesis, seed bun. So, Simon, let's say that you are the 2 all beef patties and special sauce guy, and I am the lettuce and cheese guy. I am only going to take a burger with 2 all beef patties and special sauce from Simon and apply the lettuce and the cheese. Gabriel left the room. Oliver, if you want to give me 2 all beef patties and special sauce, I'm not going to accept it because that doesn't meet the criteria for the consensus that we as a network have instantiated. However, if Simon wants to give me 2 all beef patties without special sauce, if that is an option that we've allowed from a consensus mechanism perspective, the network to accept, then we'll accept it. I know that's an uber simplified way to explain consensus, but suffice to say it's a way that the network protects the activities and the actions of the actors on the network and preserves the integrity of the data. Smart contracts. So smart contracts is nothing more than a digitized template for any type of transaction. It can be the terms and conditions of a purchase order in non-FS industries. It can be the elements of a trade in sales and trading. It can be actually an actual contract, the terms and conditions of a contract. What's interesting here is because it's digitized and every field is executable computer code, I can establish business rules around what needs to happen when certain conditions are met. So if you think about it from a money laundering, anti-money laundering perspective, let's say that at certain thresholds amount from certain account types at certain banks, if it crosses a threshold, it's going to initiate some type of compliance lookup, some type of regulatory intervention. You can configure the smart contracts to do a lot to help orchestrate some of those workflows and automate some of those workflows. Think of it as the blockchain is the rails of that transaction flow, and the smart contract potentially can play the conductor, telling the train where to stop, what data payload they're taking off and putting on the train as it traverses down the rails. So if these things come together, back to the DARPA example, most cyber attacks occur from networks getting infiltrated and then that malware germinating and infesting the network. Well, because this network refreshes itself very rapidly to the point where, I'm going to go back to my picture example. The picture I took of you, let's say that they all 250 people in this room are all nodes on the blockchain. And let's say I'm going to post that picture onto the blockchain. But Simon, being the nefarious actor that he tends to be, wants to actually Photoshop the entire side of the room out of the picture. Here's how he would have to do it. He would actually have to hack into the hash, change the picture and Photoshop it, And basically, it would have to be removed from all of the nodes, or at least half of the nodes, before the network refreshes for it to become the truth of that picture. So if you think about that, that's really powerful. That's really powerful because the cryptography makes it hard to get onto the network and to hack into information. The consensus makes it, breaking the consensus makes it hard for non-approved actions to occur. And then the architecture itself makes it virtually impossible to hack in and change the information. So you may read about certain Bitcoin hacks. I can tell you this, the only Bitcoin hacks that have worked have been basically the equivalent of picking your pocket, taking your wallet, and taking your cash. The bank has never been robbed. Again, picking your pocket is very different from the bank getting robbed. So I hope that clarifies some of the special sauce ingredients. So if I kind of wrap up and say, here are the key benefits of blockchain. So reduction of cost and complexity. So we talked about how that automation works. We see in trade finance and all kinds of different use cases where these flows get simplified because there's infrastructure at banks and other institutions around adjustments and reconciliations and your source of the truth being different from my source of the truth, and we've got to somehow come together and figure out how that's going to work. Well, if we have the single source of truth, and I have a mechanism to orchestrate all that activity, I can simplify and automate some of those workflows and make them more efficient. Shared trusted transactions. I think we hit on that pretty heavily on the last slide. Reduction of fraud. So there's a lot of discussion and investigation and investment in the blockchain community around KYC and AML being handled on a blockchain. If you think about it, if you have KYC as a utility, where basically all that information is entered once but then shared across the banking network, you don't have to replicate that process and potentially get out of sync with that process over and over again. Audit trail and transparency. So this is where it gets fairly interesting. As a matter of fact, PwC is, I like to think, leading the charge here. We're actually building this notion of an audit node on one of the large exchanges in New York. And the idea here is that it changes the nature of both the audit as well as the relationship with the regulator to say, if I provide real-time transparency and transaction monitoring, the notion of audit as a forensic activity changes drastically, as well as the relationship I have with regulators. Instead of being an opaque and semi-trusted ecosystem, I've now created an ecosystem that's completely transparent to those that need the information. Now, that's not to say that blockchain, we share everything. We don't share everything on the blockchain. We do share what is needed to be shared by certain parties on the blockchain. Finally, security and immutability, we talked about that. Resilience. So if the 250 nodes in this room, let's say the first two rows, the nodes go down. The remaining nodes in the room can still conduct business. The only instance where the process breaks down is if one of the nodes in this area is required to help complete a transaction that the other nodes need them to opine on. So we get questions a lot of times around, well, this is interesting, but I've invested in this infrastructure and I've invested in this infrastructure. How is this different? Why is this different? And the reason why it's different are kind of captured on this slide, but I'll just sum it up into a couple points. This shared single source of truth has tremendous power in these ecosystems. We see in so many instances, again, I go back to that point around your source of the truth, my source of the truth, timing issues, all kinds of challenges around the data integrity, the data not necessarily matching on both sides. It matches, it's forced to match in the blockchain. We're forced to agree at point of entry. We no longer have disputes because that update, I saw it, I agreed to it at that point in time. If you changed the price, I either refused it at that point in time or I accepted it. And then obviously the automation that you get out of the consensus, there's all kinds of tools out there that help orchestrate and automate workflows. Blockchain technology is the only one that facilitates shared workflows being automated and orchestrated. So this is a framework that we use with a lot of our client conversations. It's not meant to be comprehensive, and it's not meant to have any kind of rubric around if you answer 3 out of the 6, pass, go. It's basically just to say, if you have any type of business process or use case where multiple parties share data, multiple parties update data, there's a requirement for verification, intermediaries either add friction or complexity to the workflow, and there's real business value to the velocity of those transactions occurring faster, and the transactions have to interact. In other words, there's back and forth. Blockchain's probably a pretty good a solution to contemplate and at least investigate. So I'm going to wrap up with the challenges because I don't want to sound like I'm just pitching the Kool-Aid without letting folks know that there are some challenges to the technology, and I think Gabriel hit on them as well. You know, participant trust. You know, you are asking people to engage in a shared ecosystem in a way that is not how they do business today. And so part of the challenge is getting, you know, participants educated and aware of how this technology works, spending time to understand what they need to keep at arm's length, you know, off-chain type of communication. There's this notion of on-chain and off-chain. What needs to be off-chain because that's my special sauce, and I don't want to share my special sauce, versus what are the on-chain types of interactions that are going to drive those transactions. As Gabriel mentioned, like the clearing and settlement piece, you know, if you think about payments and clearing and settling, the acceleration that you achieve with blockchain and a shared ecosystem, truth be told, it can actually settle T0 in sales and trading. The challenge is, in cap markets, the large banks have infrastructure around the netting process, as most of us are probably aware. And the netting process is a great way from a liquidity management and a risk mitigation perspective to manage those net obligations on both sides of the table. So the technology can actually outpace what our infrastructure and our kind of, you know, framework is ready to support. Public versus private. Most of the conversations we have in industries outside of financial services tend to focus on private permission networks, which changes the complexity here. We are talking here about a permissioned and public network. Legal and regulatory framework, I think I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but I will say this. Most of the conversations around with regulators is not necessarily about the technology. It's about how do you maintain your control framework in an infrastructure that's shared. It's about your controls and your processes that's just utilizing different technologies and ensuring that you can maintain them on this new notion of shared infrastructure that's not necessarily within your four walls. Real-time auditing, I think we talked about that. Blockchain maturity, it is an evolving technology, but I will say this, the investment in both the various fabrics, which are the ledger layers, the investment at the logic layers, that smart contract and other types of technology, and more importantly, the investment being made by the cloud providers to ensure that whatever investments you make in this technology is going to be future-proof is huge. Because a lot of folks out there are concerned about, well, if I invest in this stack, is this stack still going to be around in 5 years? And the answer is, I don't know, but I can tell you with a great deal of confidence that a lot of firms are investing a lot of money to make sure that that's the truth. Adoption, I think we talked about that a little bit. Interoperability, integration, again, that speaks to the cloud providers and others. And conversations that we have, you know, with the Oracles and the SAPs of the world, for example. They have now announced blockchain as a service on their next generation cloud platforms. They see the writing on the wall. You know, a lot of people will say this is 5 to 7 years down the line. If you think about how long digital transformation generally takes, 5 years, if you're not starting around now, you're probably going to be on that side looking in, and I like to use the word get blockchained. I know it's not a word, maybe I should trademark it, but the idea is, you know, it is so exciting because you guys are on the precipice of something that's going to be, from an economic policy and monetary policy and fiscal policy thing, a perspective is so exciting. And it's really thrilling to be here. I appreciate you giving me the time, and have a great day.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, unless my eyes deceive me, I believe I saw Leader of the Opposition, Honorable Mia Motley. Welcome. Welcome. All right, so we went from, for all of you who are half knowledgeable and have come here to become more so, we went from consensus-driven algorithms, immutable public records, mathematical digital representations, and of course, even more confusing to some of us is the risk of de-risking, into 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, and onions. Now, what Chris did forget is the sesame seed bun. And the sesame seed bun is the blockchain, which keeps it all together. But more importantly, is some of the things that he said. Transactional auditing, right? Reduced fraud. Things that, even in the legacy world, we can begin to understand and speak in a language that we would be willing to adopt. Now, our next speaker is someone who's very special to a lot of the people in this room, including me. Patrick Byrne is widely recognized as a maverick and a trailblazer in the digital space. An early adopter, some would say, but I coined a phrase in Trinidad some time back called an early thinker, because early thinkers is what spawns early adopters. People like Patrick Byrne is the reason why I was an early adopter into Bitcoin. I can say safely that I may not have been an early thinker, but it's guys like him. And I'll give you a quick story before I go into. Just a couple of weeks ago, the digital space was being bombarded by the legacy space. There's various chats we have in the digital world going on, and guys were really saying, oh, we need some support here. We're getting beat up if it's not Jamie Dimon, it's China, we're all over the place, and the digital currency markets were tanking. So I got a message across to Dr. Byrne, and I said, Patrick, we need some help. I said, the guys are under fire. So Patrick swiftly organized, as obviously as a supporter, he quickly organized a meeting with Maria Bartiromo, one of the leading financial talk show hosts in America. And lo and behold, Patrick was on television, Fox Business News, the following Monday, extolling the virtues of digital currencies and why they are in fact here to stay. Needless to say, when that show started, Bitcoin was sitting at $3,550, and today it sits at $4,200. So I think what's amazing with people like Patrick is their ability to straddle both the legacy world and the digital world. In 1999, Patrick launched Overstock.com, and they achieved their first profitable quarter in 2002, in just 3 years. And I think up until recently, when Amazon squeezed out a very small profit, they were the only online retailer that actually was profitable. Using the familiarity that he had with blockchain technology, he then launched Medici, a subsidiary of Overstock.com, devoted to advancing blockchain-based technology solution. In 2015, Patrick used Medici's T0 crypto securities arm to launch a trading platform and become the first person to be the first people to purchase a digital bond entirely on the blockchain. We all know what happened in 2016 when Patrick recognized the explosive potential of a little company in Barbados and founded and funded it significantly. That ability to see into the future and recognizing the looming demise of currency, right, is visionary. As now we see even the government of Japan is considering moving cash out completely and going to what's called the J coin. And more so in this legacy world, in 2011, Patrick was recognized as, I believe it was by Ernst & Young, as the Entrepreneur of the Year, which is no small feat, considering there was a time in the early 2000s, for those who wished to be naysayers, there were many arrows pointed at him. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce my friend and my business partner, Patrick Byrne.
Lovely and generous introduction, Peter. I'm not sure I'm responsible for the entire $15 billion rally since I went on Maria's show, but I'll take your credit. Ladies and gentlemen, Governor Antoine of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Deputy Governor Doyle Lowe of the Barbados Central Bank. I know we have dignitaries here from the Caribbean Development Bank, and Stephen Simpson from the United States Embassy. I'd waste all my 25 minutes if I spent it thanking all of the dignitaries here for coming. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It is really an incredible honor to speak to you. I can't believe what's happened in the last 18 months. I'm going to give you a 11-slide presentation, just so you know how to pace yourself. Who am I? For those who don't know, I'm this guy. Wired magazine described me a few years ago, CEO of Overstock, scourge of Wall Street. That's a story I'll tell you someday. But 10 or 12 years ago, I got in this fight with Wall Street that sort of made me kind of well known in some circles because I came on a bunch of mischief and I started talking about it. And what do you know? It turned into quite an epic. And they call me the Bitcoin Messiah. I want to echo the earlier comments of those who say, you got to separate Bitcoin from blockchain. And there is all this nasty stuff in the press about Bitcoin and what people have done with Bitcoin. But as we realized a few years ago, the main event of Bitcoin is not Bitcoin. It's this thing called blockchain. And I was interested, I was interested in applications of blockchain, not investing in Bitcoin itself. But I was confident that this blockchain thing is going to transform the world as we know it. And I went looking around for entrepreneurs who agreed with me that we could fund and we could back. The result has been there's all this, I haven't even seen it yet, but I understand the new Fortune has blockchain mania on the cover. And we Overstock formed this group, Medici, to fund investments in the blockchain space. But, you know, it's one thing having a conception of what you want to invest in. It's another thing finding the right entrepreneur to invest in. I'm sorry. What is blockchain? I took this from Deloitte. This is a good illustration of the kind of thinking that's going on today, the business thinking of what's going on today. Pardon me, I took this from Deloitte. Is there a Deloitte gentleman here? Who's from Deloitte? Oh, well, and what I liked about this is, yes, all these great, you know, tax automation and insurance and ticketing. Yes, there are all these things that are going to make our lives easier with this technology. But the real main event, should I? Oh, it's okay. But really the main event, as great as these technologies are, I think that there is a new era coming to mankind riding on a blockchain. I think this is more disruptive than the internet itself. What it's going to do over the next 10 or 20 years is, I think, significantly bigger than the internet. And what I wanted to be involved, so we wanted to be involved at Overstock. We began accepting Bitcoin 3 or 4 years ago. I did that. I didn't really care about Bitcoin, as I actually said in several interviews. We wanted to learn about this technology of blockchain, and use it to really invest in 5 fundamental processes of this new age. So if there's a new age coming to humanity, riding on the blockchain, it's going to come in on 5 basic processes. And I wanted to, I'll keep you in suspense for a moment to tell you why I think this is so revolutionary is for 6,000 years, as humans have been engaged in consensual exchange, we've always had this problem of trust. And we've created all kinds of institutions to inject trust into interactions between people. Now those interactions can occur, now that trust can be achieved through the blockchain. And that doesn't necessarily mean you don't need those institutions, but it means those institutions have to and should adopt to the fact that there's now technology that is providing that core mission, accomplishing that core mission of achieving trust. So the processes I wanted to have a hand in were the creation of money, that would be blockchain meets central banking, the creation of capital, which according to an economist down in Peru named Hernando de Soto, that starts with land titling. Blockchain meets capital markets. Blockchain meets Wall Street. That it would be possible to use the blockchain to create a fair capital market that no one could cheat. All kinds of mischief that goes on Wall Street couldn't go on in this kind of in a blockchain capital market. And then the last two, of course, identity is going to be important in this new age. So there's got to be blockchain meets identity. And because I hope in this new age, it is still an age of, I'm a small L liberal, philosophical liberal. I believe in consent of the governed. And if you believe in consent of the governed, then there's got to be blockchain meets voting someday. So these were the processes I wanted to have a hand in. The most fundamental, I'll leave blockchain meets ticketing to other people, and blockchain meets gaming and gambling and all kinds of things. But the fundamental processes of civilization, which is how I view these five, this plus education, are what I wanted to have I don't see any way to have blockchain meets education. So this is what we started looking for, either companies we could build ourselves or companies we could invest in. And we found a great company on Wall Street. Its CEO is back here, but a company that already handles 3% of all the routing of Wall Street. And we bought it and blockchainified it. And that's called T0. And that's in the press quite a bit these days in the U.S. capital markets. Just look this week. There's quite a bit of press about it. I mean, it's revolutionary what it has. It's the only, you may have just heard that the SEC approved, or the SEC decided July 25th that a bunch of these ICOs, these internet coin offerings you're hearing about, really are securities. So if they are securities, they have to be traded on an exchange that can handle blockchain that is SEC compliant. And right now, there's precisely one of those in the world, and I own it. So sometimes it's better to be lucky than smart. But and that echoes a point I want to make, that we, from the beginning, we knew about Mt. Gox and those kind of guys. We didn't want anything to do with that. I'm a public figure. I'm the CEO of a public company in America. If anything goes wrong in something we invest, they're going to bury me under the prison. So I have the highest incentive of all. So everything we did on Wall Street, we did right in the middle of the SEC regulations. We took something that was SEC regulated, and we just incrementally made it capable of handling blockchain, rather than try to do something like these ICOs and this craziness you hear about. Blockchain meets identification. We have an investment in a Silicon Valley company called Identity Mind. It's one of the hot companies in that space. And blockchain meets voting. We've got a nice stake in a European company called Settlement, which among its things it's doing is voting. They just did something for the royal family of Saudi Arabia for voting. So as far as land titling goes, with a little bit of luck, you might even read an announcement next week about another endeavor of ours in this space, because I think this is very fundamental to economic processes. But the main event, and why we're all here today, is a year and a half ago at a conference there's a conference called the Satoshi Conference, the Satoshi Roundtable. And just so you know, there are about 50 people in it, and they're like the alphas, as they say, of this blockchain world. And I got invited on a fluke to come and give one of my philosophy talks, I guess. And who was there but this young fellow from Barbados, Gabriel Abed. And I had just read about him in the press. And the central Bank of Barbados had the foresight to give him permission to be the first person in the world to digitize what we in this world, or in this side of the table, call the fiat currency that exists by fiat, that a government created. And that was in the paper about 3 days earlier, and this guy showed up, and listen, entrepreneurs know entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs know entrepreneurs when we see them. And entrepreneurs are not always, I'm sometimes a little bit difficult. They say Steve Jobs was difficult. Gabe can be a little bit difficult sometimes, but we became great friends. And Gabe, listen, it takes a very special spark. Gabe, if you don't know him, he's a young fellow from Barbados that went to Toronto for university. And Toronto has quite a unusual, this technology is sort of showing up in spotty in places. So Estonia happens to have this little practice of blockchain that is, they're turning into a hub. Toronto had a very good cryptographic program that started spitting out these people. So on Blockchain Meets Wall Street, there happened to be a bunch of people up in Toronto working on that, and they're only a year or so behind us. But anyway, Gabe came out of that university system with a real interest in this stuff. And what's funny is, in the 3 or 4 or 5 years now I've been interested, when I read about blockchain and Bitcoin, I kept on hearing about Barbados. And somebody in Barbados said this or something around Barbados, and I thought, gosh, that's funny. There must be some real cryptographic subculture around here of some people who are really into it. Well, what I discovered was it was Gabe and Bitt. It was one group here. And they had created already, they kept on showing up on the global radar for blockchain. And so I came across Gabe, and over the course of a long night, we sort of plotted out the kinds of things you're seeing today of what could be built. He had much of this, he already had all the big ideas. I just had the wallet. But we plotted out what we were going to build. I came down, and before I invested, I want folks to know I had such a reception in the Caribbean, because before I decided to even really think about investing, I wanted to know that that people understood down here the potential. And I came down, I met with various treasury ministers and stock exchange CEOs and people from central banks. And I was so pleased with, and really kind of, if I may say, pleasantly surprised at how open-minded people were to this. And my mission a year and a half ago was to tell folks here, there's this new technology coming to mankind. I know it sounds crazy now, and you read about Bitcoin, and it sounds like it's all the gun running and stuff. Set that aside. This technology is going to change the world. And if the Caribbean is sort of forward-leaning in their thinking about it, the Caribbean can really be the Switzerland of this new age. And what that means on the one hand is hundreds or thousands of high-paying, white-collar jobs, tech jobs, and such. But beyond that, the Caribbean really has a unique opportunity. And so that was the message I had 18 months ago, and I really half expected it to fall on deaf ears and wondered what it was going to be like. I saw this world-class opportunity coming. I was lucky to see it a couple years early, and I thought, geez, I'm going to be here selling to people who aren't interested at all. It just sounds too newfangled. In fact, it was just completely the opposite. It was just the opposite. And from the Barbados Investment Authority to the central bank to the treasury minister to folks in Jamaica and elsewhere that we met with in Trinidad, that I really got the sense that this was a place that we could invest and fund this development and not worry that it would just fall on deaf ears when it was ready. Now, and so for that reason, we invested in this young man, Gabriel Abed, and Oliver Gale, and these two co-founders. I want to also mention that they have had the incredible maturity to know, and I wish probably I should have had this maturity. I started companies, and it's a rare entrepreneur who knows that he's built a company to the point he wants to get a CEO to replace him so he can go on. And Gabriel made that choice, and Gabriel came to us 8 months ago. And Gabe and I are going to do other things. There's a lot of terrain left in blockchain, and we're going to go on and do other things together. But Gabriel led the search for a replacement for himself. And that's really quite a mature entrepreneur. Like I say, I'm not that mature, but I wish I had been sometimes. And we have the new CEO, and Peter George, and I, and Gabe, and the folks at Medici have just fallen in love with this new CEO. And I mean, we think he's. Do you mind if well, I'll keep going. I think I'm just going to have to leave you in suspense, but it's going to be announced today at lunch who our new CEO is. So here, I think you'll be quite pleased. So you already know the problems with physical cash. There are so many. The cost of printing, the cost of theft, the cost of counterfeiting, just consumption, having to count it, replace it, so on and so forth. Here's a big one, difficulty of tracking tax evasion. In the United States, tax evasion, we have a tax avoidance number of 40%. That just means if everyone followed the law in America, we would collect 40% more taxes than we do. It would actually solve the entire financial crisis, budget problems in the United States. We'd have no deficit. What you get if a central bank will let digital currency go forward, what they're going to get first is real-time measurement of economic data. Imagine having I'm a pilot too, imagine going from 1930s instruments to GPS. You will have GPS type quality about what's going on in your economies. Surveillance and audibility. So I think what's happened in the last year or two is governments have come to realize, yes, this blockchain stuff may open a couple problems for AML, KYC issues. It also solves a ton of problems. Everything becomes immutable and audible. That also means a reduction in tax avoidance. A digital economy is one that there isn't going to be tax avoidance. In fact, I think there's going to be new ways to create tax. Now, as a small L liberal, which is another way of saying libertarian, I'm not usually out there crowing about taxes, except I believe everyone should follow the law, and I'd love to see that 40% tax avoidance number fixed. A digital economy, there's really not going to be tax avoidance. Increased seigniorage, of course, because your cost of printing is zero. Absolutely secure non-counterfeitability. If they can hack this cryptography, and by the way, I used to study at Stanford the mathematics that underlies cryptography. It's called computation theory, and it's the same basic principles underlying the nuclear codes and banking cryptography and everything. So if they can hack this, they can hack anything. And the Bitcoin blockchain is the most hacked at piece of software that's ever been created. In the last 7 years, every hacker in the world has tried to toughen it up, has tried to beat it. Can't be beat, and it just gets smarter because it's a big open source project. Reduction in cost of interbank settlement. Streamlining KYC processes, which lead to greater fraud prevention. And that's basically up to this point, these are benefits mostly to central banks and to banks. But two last benefits, reduction in cost of remittances. There's about $500 billion remitted around the world by foreign workers to different places. The average friction is about 15% on that. Some nations are 40% GDP. Armenia is 40% of its GDP is remitted from people driving taxi cabs in New York and places and such. 15% of what they remit is taken out in friction. And here's the big one. From my point of view, and Gabe, I think it's what we bonded over. Financial inclusion. I used to study development economics at Stanford. And I remember back then thinking, well, there started to be about 30 years ago a lot of talk about the problem of the unbanked and the underbanked. And how can people who are working a day's work and getting paid $6 or something and going, they keep it in their sock, they go home, they keep it in a shoebox, their family, there's always got to be someone there. They have so many headwinds against them. They are not plugged into the global system. And that makes that's the first step. And what I got so excited about, and I won't forget when Gabe told me, 15% of people in Barbados have a bank account, but 140% have a mobile phone, because people have 2. There's 140% penetration. Well, that's the whole key. It means we can skip. Back when I did development economics, we used to always talk about how much copper, how many millions of tons of copper it would take to wire up India so everyone would have a phone in their house, and then they developed a cell phone and they skipped that whole step. Imagine if we can get, we've always been trying to get financial inclusion by thinking those 85% we're going to pull into having bank accounts, but those, well, we won't need to. We can do it in a way through mobile phones. Since I've been here 18 months ago, and I'll note like a week after I left and we made this, I got a very positive feeling, and we went ahead and made an investment in Bitt, in Gabe and Oliver, Simon, and that we rented a condo on the beach here, started putting lawyers and database people down, trying to help them build capital, and turns out they didn't need much help. They were really, you have some really good technologists here, and our people were very pleased. But since we started that, within a month of us starting and announcing this, the following central banks jumped on board. Sweden came out like a month later and said, we're experimenting with digital fiat, digital currency as well. England, Canada, China, European Central Bank of Ecuador, and just this week, Japan is now talking about a J-coin. Say again? Uruguay? So it's happening. And I know I sounded like a lunatic to you folks who I spoke with 18 months ago. Oh, there's this new age coming on a blockchain. You got to understand, get in front of it. But it's true. It's happened. The whole world is getting that this is a better system. Barbados and the Caribbean is still, oh, here's the magic. They're all targeting 2018. I was just in China last week at a conference, big conference, and I met with a guy who reports to Xi Jinping. And he says, yes, we have done this digital pilot project, and we're not going to release this first. We want to see some other country do it first. We want to sit back and watch. So maybe sometime in 2018. I know, because I know many of the technologists involved in this, everyone's talking about 2018. And here we are. We've had 18 months and put all this money in, and we haven't gotten there yet. I want to give you some good news. I want to close on some good news. We're ready to launch December 15th. We have the whole stack built. We have the whole stack. Everything Gabe showed you is no longer theory. It's no longer a kid scratching it out on a matchbook cover with me, telling me what he wants to build over a glass of rum. It's the mobile wallet, the merchant payment processor, the digital asset exchange. We're ready to go. All of these are built and they are in testing now, and they will be ready for December 15th. Come hell or high water, they will be ready on December 15th. What that means is that you, the Caribbean and Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean, have a unique opportunity still. There's been a lot of talk for 18 months, and we have visited and talked about how good this might be in theory and so on and so forth. There was a crowd of the biggest and most distinguished central banks in the world lining up behind you, and just go look at their announcements, and they are going to be coming across in 2018. But there is still a chance to be the first in the world, and I think the central bank that is the first in the world that does this, or the region that is the first in the world that adopts this technology, immediately catapults. It's like India skipping the step of laying all the copper wire. You immediately catapult yourself to the very forefront of the financial technology. So I think that it's going to be time that folks here really start making decisions. Are they curious about this? What's the old saying about the difference between being interested? I used to work on Wall Street. They would tell this joke about the difference between being interested and invested. In the case of a ham and egg breakfast, the chicken is interested, the pig is invested. Okay? And I want you to know that as you consider dealing with Bitt, where it fits. Overstock.com is a publicly traded NASDAQ company, audited by KPMG, used to be with Price, and only because we change it every 5 or 6 years on principle. We're NASDAQ. I know that my reputation is on the line, and I know that the forces in the U.S. government, if anything goes wrong with Bitt, I'm the guy who goes to jail. We have 100% ownership of Medici. Medici has a large stake in T0. T0 is this company you can go look up. It's this big Wall Street blockchain meets Wall Street company, and it is recognized now as the leading. We're in the front of the whole pack on blockchain meets Wall Street, and we have this investment in Bitt. But I like to think of this relationship as more than just an investment. We have people down here. We understood that we have a nice little brother down here that we have to provide some adult supervision to, and named Peter George, but nurture into existence. And so we've had lawyers and accountants and HR and real professional people, along with all kinds of data and technologists, to come and help nurture this into existence. So you can be sure that you have the eyes of the mother company on Bitt as well, making sure everything gets done according to Hoyle. And everyone in Bitt has promised me they understand that as their obligation as well. So this is a fine company. You have all the backing of a large American company, a $2 billion retailer behind it, and you have a unique opportunity still in the next couple months to go forward, and that will put this region on the map as the most progressive, forward-leaning central bank that there is. And I think the effects that I walked through for not just the central bank but the people and financial inclusion is going to create an incredible longitudinal event where we're just going to be able to see, some discontinuity, I think, and suddenly see a 2 to 4% higher growth structure or something because of the efficiencies created by this technology. So on that, I've probably run over a little bit, as is my wont, but thank you. Again, it's a fantastic honor, and I'm going to leave the announcement of who this new Magic CEO is to Peter George over lunch. It's one you don't want to miss.
I think you can understand why we have become such good friends. I know Patrick was itching, the impulsiveness, itching. But it'll be right after lunch, folks. We'll make the announcement. I know the individual's probably starting to say, oh, he's feeling all this pressure. But now I saw some eyes when Patrick was speaking about not being hacked. Kind of, some eyes were rolling. Remember one thing, and he recently said it. Many Bitcoin and blockchain companies have been hacked, but the underlying technology has not been hacked. So just for some of you that were a bit confused by that, what a lot of us need to take certainly from Patrick's presentation is that if we in the Caribbean, if we are to be competitive, relevant, or even revolutionary, we must embrace blockchain technology. Apart from the opportunities of first mover advantage, this is a seminal opportunity to lead in the world, and certainly financial inclusion is not just an opportunity, but some, including myself, certainly would say it's our responsibility. And of course, the first mover advantage. This tsunami is coming, and it's not a tsunami of scrapping and fist fighting. It's what Schumpeter would call creative destruction. I mean, this is happening, and it's important for the bankers to understand that although some less than savory comments have been made in this space over the last couple of years, mainly some of it out of defiance because of the lack of cooperation in certain circumstances with the banks. This revolution is not one that needs to be vitriolic, and needs to be. It can be a harmonious merging of those two worlds. We at Bitt to paraphrase Patrick as well. We are the ones on the forefront of this in the Caribbean, from our AML policies, KYC, FIU, Pricewaterhouse has put their stamp on our operational procedures. So it's just for everyone to understand, we have spent the last 18 months outside of building products to building that compliance strength so that there can be an understanding between the players who are not in the space to understand this is not for us launching a wallet or launching a product, as there have been some in the last 3 or 4 months in the Caribbean. It's not just an opportunity to make some money. It's an opportunity for real meaningful change. So I'm glad that Patrick mentioned that. And at the end of the day, if by 2025 it doesn't work here, and probably before 2025, if it does not work here, you're not in the game. So that responsibility, I think, is something that we at Bitt take very, very seriously. Now, our next speaker is somebody who I have heard a lot about, but I have in fact never met. Timothy Antoine, before becoming the governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank in January 2016, had a distinguished 22-year career in the government of Grenada. A lot of that time he served as a PS in the Ministry of Finance. He has also contributed to the OECS, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, and wider Caribbean by serving on local and international boards, including chairman of the Grenadian Authority for the Regulation of Financial Institutions, the chairman of the ECCU Technical Core Committee, chairman of the Governance Reform Committee and the board of directors of the CDB, and a director of the ECCB. More importantly, he is aware of the transformational process and potential of the blockchain. So it's my pleasure to bring up Dr. Timothy Antoine, Governor of the ECCB.
Thank you very much, Mr. Master of Ceremonies. I do want to recognize, I'm told, Senator Ince, as well as the leader of the opposition. I haven't actually seen them, but I'm told they're in the room, and I want to show due respect to the leaders in the land, and of course to recognize colleagues, central bank governors, as well as captains of industry, people from the financial community and elsewhere. So, I want to commence by hailing the pioneering efforts of Bitt in the area of fintech and on the initiative to organize this very timely conference. The fact that this conference is sold out speaks volumes about the public interest and the curiosity on this issue. I also want to thank the Bitt team for extending an invitation to the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank to share our perspective at this conference. My simple hope today is that we would broaden the conversation, strengthen our collaboration, as we deepen our understanding of financial technology, in particular blockchain, and its powerful promise for our region. In advancing this conversation, we are confronting the tension of judging too soon and deciding too late. Judging too soon and deciding too late. Of course, that's a perennial leadership challenge. But I will tell you this, given the economic condition of this region at this time, it's a challenge we need to embrace. And the ECCB accepts this challenge, cognizant that the bank, our bank, can and must influence the adoption speed of fintech innovation in the region, particularly in the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. And our disposition as a bank is to support and encourage innovation while keeping the financial system safe. That's the disposition of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. Support innovation while keeping the financial system safe. So the theme of my remarks, and sorry I don't have a TV show, I decided not to go with PowerPoint after all. The future is now, leveraging blockchain for economic transformation. That's the theme of my remarks. And let me say this, this region needs economic transformation. This region we love called the Caribbean needs economic transformation. And I want to see it in my lifetime. I don't toil in the vineyard of public service simply to collect a check at the end of the month or to say he was there. I am doing this job to make a difference. Folks, I'm a little emotional at this moment. 3 of my members are hurting, and I am hurting with them. As you know, we've had a direct hit, Dominica, Anguilla, Antigua, and Barbuda. They are our brothers and sisters. So if anything, I have extra motivation to move to transformation. Because that is what these countries need at this time. You can't put back the whole infrastructure that they had because they can't withstand another category 5. And everything we've heard about climate change tells us there will be more of these sorts of storms. So what are we going to do? As we speak at this moment, this region is averaging less than 2% growth per annum. We need to get to at least 5%. That's the goal of the ECCB, the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. I know that's Jamaica's target as well. I think they call it 5 and 4. How are we going to get there? Before the storms, before Irma and Maria, we were talking in the ECCB about how can we attain 5% and sustain it and create 60,000 jobs over the next 8 years, because that is what we're going to need to get to single-digit unemployment. And last year we did 2.6%. Now we have to rebuild. But before I get on to economic transformation, let me just make this point. The most immediate challenge we have right now is to convince the rest of the world, those who are still doubting, that climate change is not real. And we have an urgent task to make sure everybody gets it. I was in Toronto earlier this week. Very warm, extremely warm at this time of year. And everybody's wondering and say, well, confirmation of global warming. The US just got the worst storm in history. And then we got our category 5s right after that. So the immediate task for us is to convince those who are still on the fence or who are doubting that climate change is real, and we have to do something about it as a community. Now, it's not enough for the Caribbean to care about it, because we by ourselves can't change the fact. We are very low emitters, and we are the worst off victims. We are the most affected victims. So the rest of the world needs to pay attention. So our immediate task, I'm coming back to blockchain, by the way. I digress to set the context for blockchain technology in the Caribbean. That's what I'm doing. The point is that we must convince the rest of the world to get on board and fight climate change because it's real. And we have to address this analytical absurdity and this callous classification that these small, poor, vulnerable countries are high income and cannot qualify for grants and concessionary finance. We have to address that. So having said that, that's our immediate task. So that's what we're in New York and Toronto and all over doing. We have to transform this region. And I certainly believe blockchain technology has the potential to help us do that. And that is why I am here. Several central banks have begun to experiment with blockchain technology, and you've heard it. The Monetary Authority of Singapore has invited blockchain startups to pitch their offerings and has selected a few of these firms for pilot testing. The Bank of Canada, in collaboration with its largest banks, is developing a digital version of the Canadian dollar. The Bank of England has authorized mobile banks and is pursuing several projects to better understand distributed ledger technology, data privacy, and cybersecurity. And central banks of France, Netherlands, and South Africa have all announced plans to pilot blockchain technology. So what is the ECCB, the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank? One of 4 formal monetary unions in the world. What are we doing? Well, we understand that fintech applications include payments and money transfer, insurance platforms, securities trading and settlement, digital identity management, banking infrastructure, asset management, corporate governance, and peer-to-peer transactions. To leverage blockchain for economic growth and transformation in our region, the ECCB will support the development or the deployment of all applications, but is particularly interested at this time in the opportunities of issuing a digital currency, payment and transfers, and KYC utilities. That's our top 3 priorities right now. So we're open to talk about everything else, but that's our immediate 3. So what are we doing? At present, the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank is engaged in active discussions with Bitt about a pilot in the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union. This pilot would explore the development of a digital Eastern Caribbean dollar using distributed ledger technology with a blockchain platform specifically designed for a safe and secure financial ecosystem. Essentially, it is a proof of concept designed to demonstrate the viability and functionality of ECCD using digital Eastern Caribbean dollars. Like all technology adopted by the ECCB in our 34-year history, this blockchain platform will be subjected to rigorous testing to determine its suitability for broad-based implementation. What are the benefits? Well, Dr. Byrne, who preceded me, shared many of those benefits. I don't think I want to go over those in the interest of time. Of course, increased seniorage is always something we want to look at. Non-confidability, auditability. Now, in the case of the ECCU, we have 8 members. One of the things we actually do, we track currency across the 8 countries. So it's not just issuing, but we have to see what is going on in each of our islands, because they tell us stories about economics and of course, they intended to help inform monetary policy and otherwise, and credit policy. So we need auditability. And from all I've seen so far, blockchain allows that. So I'll say no more on that for now. Stay tuned. Let's move on. Payment and transfers. We absolutely believe that payments need to be far more efficient than they are at this moment. This outcome is an urgent necessity for our region. And you saw again the issue with the remittances. Our customers are demanding it and our economies require it. I am quite concerned that in 2017, a significant proportion of payments in our region are still paper-based, cash and checks. Some estimate that it could be as high as 70% on average. Obviously, some countries are a lot lower. But the reality is that that is way too high. What do you think the figure is in Belgium, the most cashless country in the world? 7%. You see what we have to do? So how are we going to make that transformation? It has to be a quantum leap. It can't be some of the incremental things that I see happening at this moment. It's just not going to work. It's just too long, too slow, and frankly irrelevant at this point in time. We have to quantum leap using the technology that is available to us. This state of affairs is not good for our region's competitiveness or our fight against crime, both of which need urgent redress. Consider the case of a tourist who wishes to make a purchase. She does not have cash, but she has a credit card. The vendor wants cash and does not have a credit card machine. The outcome? No business. But guess what? Both the tourist and the vendor have a smartphone. And with the appropriate payment app, the vendor can secure the sale and the tourist can get the service. Folks, this is not rocket science. Yet, virtually every day in this region, the scenario I just described plays out. We've got to change that. It is time, high time, that this region uses its smartphones smartly. If the penetration rate is over 100%, then surely we need to make smarter decisions with our smartphones. They're called smart for a reason, I think. Now, having spent the foreign exchange to purchase them, it is time, high time, that we start earning some foreign exchange by using them to sell services. What is the outcome? Today as bankers, earlier this week I was in Toronto meeting banks and they all spoke about the huge investments they're making in compliance, risk management. And as one banker said, my foremost concern today is AML-CFT, anti-money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism. But we think this technology is finished. Not an expert in the technology, but I've heard so far that there is but I have said before that we believe that as we address these problems and we realize the choices as we try to ensure that we address the concerns, that there needs to be investment in these technologies, not just by the private sector, but even by some of the developed countries. And we look at how the internet was developed. We look at the role of the US government, we look at the role of Europe over time in some of these developments. Given financial stability is that international public good, a global public good, if you think about it. And therefore we feel that we can make the case for to ensure that the global system is safe. And after what we went through the global financial crisis, I think we all realize how important that is. So my first key message is really leverage blockchain technology for economic transformation. I have two more and they're going to be shorter than the first. That's the good news. The second is, so if I had to summarize, if Marla cut me off right now and said, Governor, your time is up. My three messages are simple, so I'll say it one time before they cut me off. Benefits, infrastructure, and teamwork. Benefits, infrastructure, teamwork. I think that spells Bitt, by the way. But that was just 9 games. When you're taking a long flight, you have time to think of all those things. So, for financial innovation to proceed and thrive in our region, it requires a suitable enabling environment or infrastructure. And here I briefly mentioned 4 pillars, and I'm just mentioning it. Faster, cheaper, and more reliable broadband connectivity. Modernization of the payment system legislation. Adaptive regulation. Public education. And earlier you heard one of the speakers talk about trust, participation trust. And to build trust around this technology and any reform for that matter in the region, there has to be public engagement and public education. Any reform. If it's computer, well, so speaking as a regulator, I acknowledge that a major challenge for adoption of fintech blockchain despite its many benefits, fintech innovation poses considerable challenges to regulators. The rapid entrance of fintech startups, expanding requiring oversight of the financial sector. Furthermore, existing financial institutions are increasingly partnering with fintech firms. Along with that, the challenge is that the lines now get blurred about which activities are in and which are outside. And central banks in particular and other regulators have to spend time figuring out what exactly is that business, where should it be properly regulated. You don't want to over-regulate, and at the same time you don't want to do too much a light touch, because we have responsibility to protect the safety and soundness of the financial system. And so that's the challenge. And of course,
until today, has not formally launched our product yet, and we're waiting, obviously, until December. Our focus has been on exactly on that, and not just compliance, but solutions. Being able to be armed with the solutions and the answers to the questions that various stakeholders will have in this space. That makes our partnership prospect far more potent. So, you know, it is important that he touched on that, and it's something that I think is important for people to understand. There's been a lot of pot-shot product launching and everyone else. This for us is not necessarily about making money. It really is about making a difference, and it goes back to our slogan of empowering people, which actually was refined from changing the world, which was a little bit more broad and ambitious. So on that note, we're going to break for lunch, and I'm going to remind you that I think we're only about 10 minutes behind schedule. I believe lunch was 12 or 11:50, 20 minutes. So if we could, it's now 10 past 12. Let's reconvene instead of 12:50, 1 o'clock. So we're going to make back up 10 minutes of the lost time. And remember, this all-important announcement will be happening immediately after lunch. So let's get our lunch in and then come back in for 1 o'clock. And we'll see you all then. Thank you so much for the first half.
Hey, hey, 1, 2, check. Hey, hey, 1. Well, 1, 2, check. Yeah, 1. Hey, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Hey, hey, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, check. Hey, 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 hey. Hey, hey, 1, 1, 1, 1. Ha. Hey, 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 1, 2, check. Yeah, yeah, 1, 2, check. Yeah, hey, hey, 1, 1, 1. I would like some folks to go. 1, 2, check. 1. Hey, 1, 2. 1, 2, check. Hey, 1, 2. Check. 1, 1. I can try to get the bell back. He asked if you could use one of these. And he said, I got one. So she good. This actually, this is one of his. So what we've been waiting for 5 and a half months. Stick to that. I know our podium, right? Everything. Good stuff. Hey, 1, 2. Check. 2, 1, 2.